Hi, everybody. You know, when I do these things, I always like to meet early backstage so that we can have a little conversation and get to know each other. And we had such a great conversation backstage. I'm really hoping it translates back out onto the stage. So let's try and give him something, okay? I'm Ron Miller. I'm the founder and editor at Fast Forward, a blog and weekly newsletter covering the enterprise and the leaders that shape it. You know, we hear a lot of AI hype at this event, and I'd like to push back on that a little and get into the reality of what makes AI work or not inside large organizations. So I'm pleased to be chatting with Brad and Prukalpa about some of real-world issues that often hold back projects. And when we were talking about, you know, there's more and more projects being vibe coded, and that creates even more, I think, surface for data context problems, data readiness problems, and certainly governance problems. So, and those are the kinds of things that determine whether a project makes it into production and stay compliant once they do. So let's get started.
All right, let's go.
So if AI makes it possible to widely deploy software, and the phrase I've heard this week is letting 1,000 flowers bloom, a lot. I've heard it a lot. So, but the research consistently shows that companies have trouble from getting what you call the proof of concept graveyard, I think.
The prototype graveyard.
Yeah, the prototype graveyard. Getting beyond that stage, I mean, I think it's been consistently about a third, you know, for like 3 years since ChatGPT. So what do you guys think is holding back more project success? And why don't you introduce yourselves as you answer? You want to start?
Sounds good. Yeah, awesome. My name is Prukalpa. I'm the founder of a company called Atlan. We are a context layer for AI. The problem that we solve is, well, if you think about a human employee and when they join a company, you typically onboard them and then you give them context about their job and then you give them like a mentor and feedback loops and then they join town halls where they understand the strategy of the company. That's what makes a human person perform on a job. In fact, they found that only 17% of job performance is related to IQ or intelligence. A lot of everything else is learning on the job to build judgment. And we just don't seem to be able to do that for AI today. Over the next 2 years, we're going to onboard 2x the number of digital workers as human workers. That's what the estimates say. But how do we actually find a way to make them successful and give them context about the company to help them really understand how a business works? I've been spending the last 2 years talking to enterprises to try and figure out what it's going to take to get AI into production. And we see this constant thing where we see on one side, so many POCs, so many pilots, so much excitement. And then, you know, I would ask people, I was like, well, how much of this is in production? And then suddenly, like, the eyes would droop and someone will talk about, you know, like, yeah, that one use case and this, like, customer support. And we see this chasm. And in that chasm is really, we think of, like, really 3 problems. The first is just data. To make something work at scale, I had a CIO who told me the other day, I have 1,000 AI use cases and I don't even know where my data is.
Right.
How do I solve that? Then there's business meaning. Another CIO said, in my company, TAM means total addressable market. In every other company, it could mean like 100 things, but in my company, that's what it means. How do I teach it that? And then eventually governance, like, I'm okay with my HR team shipping an app on payroll data that only they can use. But what about, I don't want anyone else in my company to like use that because, well, it could spit out my CEO's salary to a random person. And like, how do you do that? Those are the challenges that we see in this chasm of productionalizing AI. What do you see?
Yeah, so maybe to introduce, I'm Brad, I'm co-founder and CEO at Superblocks. And what we do is, we help companies vibe code enterprise solutions and AI applications on their private enterprise data. So as it goes with what you said, Ron, about letting 1,000 flowers bloom, this is what every CIO, what every company is looking to do is already, without them even having any notice or any control, employees are vibe coding, let's say, at the edges of the organization. And it's happening with hundreds of different applications at the edge. And what we're seeing that stops this from being successful, to your question, is exactly what you said, which is it's all about governance. And so how do you control the data permissioning for what employees can access? How do you control the auditing? Because ironically, governance is the only way to get speed. Otherwise, IT shuts everything down. And so that's what we're seeing in the market today. And that's a really exciting trend. And it always starts with the excitement and the exuberance of how great the technology is. But enterprises have a different problem, which is how do they do this without taking risk? And I think that's where the conversation is today.
And I mean, that's where especially the data question comes into play, because as you say, like you can expose data pretty easily if you don't know what you're doing. You don't have rules in place to help people kind of falling into something they shouldn't, right? Because if everybody can code an app and point at something, there's got to be something in place that says, no, you don't have access to that. Just like you don't have access to it when you're going through Salesforce or Microsoft products or whatever, right? One of the things that I've been talking about a lot is when it comes to AI, I mean, people think that, the old rules don't apply. The IT fundamentals always apply, right? And I think AI projects fail when you ignore the fundamentals, you ignore the governance, you ignore the data cleansing, you ignore the data readiness, you ignore putting guardrails around things. Why do you think some companies and maybe even some vendors are glossing over these problems to make AI sound like it's super easy and like that those problems don't really exist? And what does it take to kind of change that mentality?
Yeah. What we see, and you're right, I think there's a tension today inside organizations. On one side, there's a tension for speed and value.
Right.
Because you've shown people this demo and you're like, well, I need to get this to production, and that's on one side. And on the other hand, there is this, and I can't screw it up. And that's a very fair tension, I think, that exists in the org. It also drives a lot of, there's human emotion that's associated with it. Like we've seen customers that have been stuck in testing hell for 12 months on a single use case because they're trying to ship an AI analyst and the CEO is going to see it. And for the first time, we're dealing with non-determinism. And if they ask a question, if the CEO asks a question, they could ask any question. And well, what if the answer is inaccurate because it picked the wrong data or picked the wrong metric? And there's no North Star. I don't know how to know what 100% accuracy is. And so then you're just stuck in this loop. What we've seen the most forward-thinking companies do is embrace the tension and agree that speed is really critical. We cannot be sitting here and running a 3-year-long foundations improvement project because there's just no way that the business is not going to allow for that. The world is moving too quickly. At the same time, build the thing that you're building in the right way with the right foundation. So the best teams we work with have AI use case teams that are focused on shipping and getting to value, but they're also doing it with the right foundations. So when I ship this, I make sure my context is portable. I make sure that I'm shipping with the right tooling infrastructure in the background so that, the chances of something crazy happening are lower. So we're seeing that play out.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
I think it basically goes back to, if you want to go fast, you need a seatbelt, right? And so every organization out there is trying to figure out what's the right seatbelt for this use case, right? Once they have that in place, they can go, 100 miles an hour down the freeway. Otherwise, it's a stop sign at every intersection.
Yeah.
And so really, I think what some of the best companies we're seeing in the enterprise do is it's actually the leadership that is prioritizing and focusing instead of boiling the ocean, and then setting one use case that has to go to production at a time and organizing a cross-team effort.
Yeah.
Because most use cases are not hey, I'm going to do this just in operations or just in marketing or just in sales or just in customer support. Everything ties into their whole data ecosystem. And once you have that, you have already 3 to 5 teams involved. And so you really need a leader who's going to basically make those teams work together on a focused initiative and figure out what's the right seatbelt for the use case.
Yeah.
So there are two things that I'm kind of hearing from you guys. One is that you have these people who are trying to build these applications and kind of getting stuck in a loop, of making sure it's perfect, right? And anybody who uses this technology knows that it's going to make some mistakes from time to time, and that's part of the cost of doing business. But it's true of kind of any endeavor, right? Not everything is going to be perfect. The other thing is, like kind of from your platform's perspective, is that anybody can build an app now, right? Yeah. So you have on one hand people building small apps that are useful for their particular use case and their particular business sector, and you have like the company looking at something like this AI analyst and trying to put out this perfect thing. This kind of a tension between the two, right? Yeah. And like on one hand, the one that's the ease of building, it creates a problem, and then the difficulty of building creates a problem. And I wonder how you talk to customers about resolving that tension.
Yeah. My favorite phrase recently has been, my co-founder says this, speed up to speed up. Like there used to be a world where we would say slow down to speed up. And in that world, you would be like, oh, all these things, like, governance should take, it's going to take us like 2 years to do this right. IT security is going to take us 2 years to do this right. Ontologies and context is going to take us, there used to be like these massive, like they used to run differently at different speeds. The good news is you don't need to do that anymore. Actually, all these things, AI can do if you use the right platform, AI can do a great job at bootstrapping enterprise context today. And you can go live in 5 days. You just need to build the right foundation. And so the way I like to think about it right now is that the tension should exist, and the only thing to do is build operating models like seatbelts. I like the idea of that. And you should speed up to speed up. I don't think we're in a world where you should slow down to speed up.
It's just hard to get enterprise, I think, management to do that, right?
Yeah. So I think strong leadership has never been more important than today. The best customers that I know, I was talking to another customer the other day who was saying executive leadership says we should use AI. I was like, well, are they using AI? Are they building? Are they shipping? Well, you need to find a way to get them to do that. So the best companies we know, the CXOs are building on the weekend. And I've seen this from Fortune hundreds to tiny startups. So this is not, for the first time, I'm actually seeing AI innovation is not, it's not distributed the way normally you would think. You'd be like, oh, the smaller companies are faster and nimbler. I don't think that's true. I think how the humans are evolving is driving a lot of change. And I think that's the hardest. They say technology changes exponentially, organizations change logarithmically, and people never change.
Right.
And so I think the places where the people are changing exponentially is where everything else is driving downstream.
Yeah, and one thing I would add on top of that is, we talked about this earlier, but basically the solution to a lot of problems as the whole market changes is actually more AI agents. So for example, if you're thinking about someone building an AI application, the immediate question you're going to get is, who's going to review the code if someone goes and vibe codes something? Then the second question is going to be, well, who secures that code? Right? And so the answer to all of this actually needs to be rethought for a world of 100x the amount of software, 100%. Meaning it cannot all be human gated. And so even what we saw with Anthropic Mythos yesterday being this very advanced cybersecurity hacker at the end of the day, you could actually have the best security checks and security scans with AI better than any human in your organization. You could have the best code review. And I think the whole SDLC is going to be rethought. And that's when things are going to really accelerate. But that's part of the challenge in working in the enterprise is not only they're unlocking a capability, they're also thinking about, well, how does my whole process change now? And the answer happens to be many times more AI agents.
So we are under a minute, but I want to ask you a quick question. I hope you can answer it quickly. When you have all these things that people can do themselves, And then who's accountable if something goes wrong? So I know that's a hard question to answer quick, but just give the quickest answer you can.
I think that's going to be the hardest question for enterprises and actually society to answer is you can't send AI to jail today. You can't send it to prison. And I think that is going to be as society, we have to answer that question. I don't think there's a straightforward answer. Who gets fired? That's the problem that hasn't been figured out today.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're out of time, Brad, so we're going to have to let that one go. But let's thank both these great panelists. This has been a great chat.